Hello, and welcome to Leveraging Thought Leadership. I'm your host, Bill Sherman, and today we talk about one of my passions, organizational thought leadership. That is, the people who create, curate, and deploy thought leadership on the behalf of their organization. My guest today is Surya Kolluri, the managing director at Bank of America. He leads thought leadership efforts for the retirement and personal wealth business services. He comes to thought leadership with a deep strategy background. 14 years as a strategy management consultant at Bain and A.T. Kearney. Then at Bank of America, he was head of strategy and also ran a business unit. Welcome, Surya.
Bill, thank you very much. Terrific opportunity, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Great. So let's start with the question of how did you get here? How did you get into the world of thought leadership?
Yeah, Bill, it's a great question. I would almost say I couldn't have predicted that this happened. I took the traditional path of, after business school, being in management consulting for many years, as you said, first at A.T. Kearney and then at Bain and Company. And I transitioned over to Bank of America to run strategy for our wealth management business. And over the years, after having done many roles, our business unit leader had asked if I could develop some partnerships with various institutions to develop research. In those days, we did not even call it thought leadership. I think the term thought leadership has come into vogue in the last maybe couple of years. So it was a gradual transition. Did not know what would it turn out to be, but it has been a fantastic journey.
So you said you were asked to develop some partnerships. What were those? And can you give an example of what your first steps in thought leadership were?
Indeed. So they have grown in size and number and depth over the years. But in the beginning, we first developed a relationship with the Age Lab at MIT. And we also developed a relationship with the Center on Longevity at Stanford University and the Pension Research Council at the Wharton Business School. So those three relationships give us a start. And then we founded some partnerships ourselves. And today, the number of partnerships is nearly 15, if you can imagine. And so that allows us to leverage a lot of leading thinkers outside of Bank of America in partnership with us to create thought leadership that's very valuable for our clients.
And I think that's one thing that's very important. And we'll get into team and team structure, but most thought leadership teams within an organization are relatively small themselves. So they have to build partnerships with other people inside the organization, as well as reach beyond the organization to build partnerships so that you can create impact, right?
Indeed. In fact, the metaphor I would use, Bill, is I think a thought leader in a corporate environment is almost like on a bridge. On one side might be deep researchers doing research on important issues. On the other hand, there might be folks within corporations trying to develop solutions for clients. And the person on the bridge, the thought leader, the corporate thought leader, brings those two worlds together so that important problems are solved using data and research, and valuable solutions are then created for clients. So, in other words, if you built this whole team in the corporate environment, that's not going to be as nimble as being on this bridge and pulling folks together.
And I want to explore there a little bit deeper. You have that depth of knowledge in strategy, right? And you've led strategy. And what I would like to ask is, people come to thought leadership from different perspectives. They may come out of content marketing and move into thought leadership. They may come from product. You've come from strategy. How does your past, either working in strategy or as a management consultant, or even from your engineering background, inform the work that you do today?
Yeah, and the way I would like to frame that is in terms of a time horizon. So if you think of an engineer who is either constructing something or designing something, it's for an immediate use. If you think about a strategist, which I've played that role for many years, helping maybe create strategic plans, you might have a 3 to 5 year outlook. The way I think about a thought leadership role is to think about even longer time horizons, thinking about mega trends. So one mega trend might be the aging of the global population. That's not a 3 or 5 year story. That's a 15, 20-year story. And how do you think about positioning an organization, positioning a community, positioning societies within that megatrend? And there might be all kinds of megatrends. There could be technology megatrends, et cetera. So a thought leader really looks around the corner into the future and positions to take advantage of those opportunities or mitigate challenges.
Well, and there's something fascinating there. So we're often focused on the pipeline for sales for the month or the quarter, and different business units have different time horizons, right? And so marketing sales are the most short term often. And then, like you said, strategy of 3 to 5 years, and you're even further out looking and asking that question. But I know you play an interesting role within Bank of America in terms of working with frontline sales and marketing. So, how do you use some of the work from looking around the corner in the future to inform what's going on today?
Yeah, Bill, that's a great question. So let me give you a tangible example.
Please.
Well, one of the focus areas that we have at Bank of America is to help clients live richer, better financial lives. We are a bank and we would think about it that way. And we've identified life stages that we go through and looked at financial opportunities and challenges people have as they go through their life stages. So you can imagine if we are focused on this aging megatrend, then if you can break that aging, that 100-year life into life stages, people can think about now how to navigate those. So that's an example of how what's a megatrend that you have a long horizon on is broken down into how our advisors and our product development colleagues can think about helping along those life stages.
So, can you give an example of how those life cycles come to be and what sort of impact are they creating?
Yeah, so think about it this way. One of the big topics that folks have to think about is, for example, the topic of caregiving. So, particularly in today's time and age, when we are all isolated, you can imagine elders in the family are even more so isolated, with family members not being able to visit them and help them. So, caregiving is a high priority. And so, a lot of our research is focused on how can we help our advisors, help our clients provide information and resources such that caregiving can be properly done. Not only are we doing that for our clients, but the bank is also doing it for our own associates. So caregiving, so you would not imagine caregiving suddenly being a topic of importance within a financial services organization, but here it is, thanks to our ability to think about what are the needs clients have, and one of them being caregiving.
So let me push this a little bit further. So if I'm a financial advisor, I may be used to saying, okay, here's a topic. I've got a meeting with a client coming up. I look in a set of file folders and I pull something, whether it's a one pager on a topic or a document that just helps me prepare for that conversation. But that material could be content marketing in some ways, right? How do you help the financial advisor elevate the conversation and really create a meaningful experience between the financial advisor and the client? Can you give me an example of that?
Yeah, one of the things we have done is created training for our advisors on the topic of gerontology. So imagine that we're not a pharmaceutical or a health care oriented organization. We are a financial services organization, yet in partnership with the University of Southern California Leonard Davis School of Gerontology, have created a gerontology certificate that advisors could take and go through 8 modules, take some tests, and come back out of it with a gerontology certificate, which gives them a lot of confidence to have a very different conversation with clients.
So give me an example of how the thought leadership team supports financial advisors, right? What can you do that downloading, say, a content marketing piece can't do, for example?
So it's a terrific question, Bill. So I'll give you an example. In addition to the training, we also do events for clients with advisors. So I remember an occasion in the Midwest where we did an event on the topic of cognitive decline in Alzheimer's, which is a rather specific topic. And we did that in partnership. We have a financial gerontologist on my team. So we had the financial gerontologist, myself, and a corporation that is very involved in this Alzheimer's area. And so together we did a panel, and the advisor had their practice and their clients and their families attend this event. And you can imagine the topic of Alzheimer's being discussed with a Bank of America Merrill Lynch brand. And at the end of it, we got a lot of feedback from clients who said, hey, thank you for putting this topic on the table that we were reluctant to discuss within the family. But now the topic is on the table, and we can discuss much more openly how we structure the communication and finances within the family to attend to this issue. So that's a specific example of how, and many other topics we take to clients include things like I said before, caregiving or social security and other topics.
I think that's a great example in that emotional connection that thought leadership can create, where you can be relevant on a much deeper level and create, in some cases, deep loyalty, where you created the opportunity for a family to have a conversation that they were struggling to have on their own, right? And
Indeed.
opening that door.
Indeed. So one of the life stages, I was talking about life stages with you before, and one of the life stages is around widowhood. You can imagine, if you're talking about emotion and complexity, that is really emotional and a complex situation. And I was not sure how that study would be received. But I can tell you, once we launched it and the feedback we've received is, to your point, very emotionally resonant, which opens the door to have broader, deeper conversations and build that relationship with the client.
It moves from transactional to relational in a true and meaningful way when you're standing behind someone at a truly difficult point in their life, right?
Exactly. And throughout our life journey, there are such life events: birth of a child, purchase of a home, retirement, right? And each of those points, you should be able to make an emotional connection with the client.
If you are enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about the podcast, please leave a 5-star review and share it with your friends. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major platforms, as well as at leveragingthoughtleadership.com. So you talked about being that bridge. Let's go talk about the relationship that you have with the external research partners and how you work to create thought leadership in collaboration with them. What is that process like, and how are you aligning the efforts between Bank of America Merrill Lynch and those research institutions?
Bill, there are many examples, as you can imagine, with my team. Some work is proprietary, some work is completely sponsored. But let me give you just one example to illustrate the point. So one of our partners that we work with is the Gerontological Society of America, GSA. And over the past few years, we've done a series of studies with them. So one is around the topic of the longevity economy. So as people are getting older, what is the economics associated with this older population? Very successful. And then last year, we did a study on longevity fitness, which is, if you're going to live 100-year lives, how do we stay fit socially? How do we stay fit physically and mentally? And then, of course, how do we stay fit financially? And holistically, all those pieces are to fit for these successful longer lives. So that's an example of a series of studies that we're doing. We're doing one more this year with them, and similarly with our other partners. So we identify a topic, we put together a board of advisors, we have a professional writer, do a lot of research, like surveying, etc., and put it together.
And I think that's a good example where, as you said, with the longer time horizon, you can ask the deeper questions and say, what does this mean, and have time to explore them, right?
Exactly right.
So we've talked about partnerships, we've talked about relationship with frontline. Let's talk about how thought leadership supports senior leadership and creates opportunities for senior leadership. What are you doing with your leadership? How does that work? And how do you help them communicate a thought leadership message?
Bill, this might be one of the important considerations of thought leadership that you've raised, which is thought leadership can not only create great content for our advisors to take to our clients, but also position the entire organization, position our senior leaders as being able to differentiate the organization in the marketplace. So high visibility events, if you have the right content, is possible. So I'll give you two examples. One was in 2014, the White House held a conference on aging. And given our work and our thought leadership, we were invited, the head of our business was invited to the West Wing to make a presentation that was broadcast around the nation. Another example, personally for me, is I was invited to a convening of the G20 last year in Japan to share our thought leadership. Similarly, there was a Silver Economy Forum in Helsinki where the head of my business was invited last year. So huge global platforms where we can share our research that differentiates us in the marketplace would be one way in which senior leaders are able to leverage what we're able to produce in the thought leadership team.
And so there's a couple different functions there. There's one, getting that opportunity to speak at that stage, whether that's the West Wing or the G20. So opening that door for the opportunity to speak. The next one is, what do you say during that opportunity? How do you make the most of that opportunity? And I think that ties nicely to thought leadership strength, to be able to identify which ideas do we spotlight, which ones do we put in that showcase, right?
Yeah,
And that,
and also importantly, it is not that we have a better product to sell, right? It is
right.
about, here's an idea that helps the world. Here's an idea that helps people along their life stages. So it really elevates the level of dialogue that you're able to have.
And when you're at those events, you have opportunities for connections. And so what I've seen with thought leadership as well is when you're at an event, you've got those 5-minute pull asides where you talk with someone. And those connections spark ideas that can generate further opportunities. And so thought leadership really can serve nicely as that strategic hub where you're looking and saying, what ideas do we need to get out there? What ideas does the world need to understand and digest? And how do we help an idea reach scale?
Bill, I want to illustrate your point, very important point. This might be the most important point that we're making with an example. So I was at a World Economic Forum convening at the University of Pennsylvania about 2 or 3 years ago, which was at the intersection of healthcare and financial services. So I was there, I was participating in a panel, etc. But I was sitting at a table next to the CEO of the Gerontological Society of America, right? To your point, it was a 5-10 minute conversation, and that led to the example I gave earlier about the studies we have done with them on longevity economy and longevity fitness. So it all came out of that networking where you paid attention and you made the connection and it led to something.
Well, and that's a perfect example of if you weren't there, or if you sat next to the person but didn't speak to them, or you just talked about, hey, how's the coffee, or busy day today, what'd you think of the session? You would have missed opportunities. And so thought leadership, whether it's senior leadership level or down at the front line, really can serve as a way to fuel future conversations or sustain a conversation when it's not a sales conversation.
Well
Right?
said. Well said. Totally agree.
So talk to me a little bit about your team. What does your team look like? Who's on it? And I'm guessing you're relatively lean as a team. So who's on the team and how do you get done with all the stuff that you have to get done?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. I'd like to position the team as nimble.
Okay. Okay.
And so we get a lot done. It's a fairly senior team, so they're mature and they can run their work on their particular lanes. But the way we have structured it is we have the financial gerontologist that I described,
Mhm.
who worries about all these living longer type of issues and caregiving, etc. We have another person who thinks about the topic of ESG, environmental social governance factors, which is a big topic that we are researching and delivering on. Another person thinks about uh, employee benefits. So if you think about, in our business, the retirement business, we serve many institutions and many employees of those institutions. So what's on the minds of employees? What's on the minds of employers? And how do you bridge that gap? So there's another person who does that. And we also have people who work on Social Security and Medicare and healthcare cost type of issues. So we cover the waterfront, and then we have the services of analysts, of course. But then, given that we are a larger organization, lots of support partners in marketing and communications and finance, etc. So virtually, we punch well above our weight.
And now you're responsible as the leader for a team doing thought leadership. How do you see your role as sort of the leader of thought leadership within a team, as well as the role with your colleagues within the organization? What's your role?
Yeah. So what I would say is, it's kind of threefold. One is, as we have talked about before, build deep, enduring, well-regarded partnerships. Two, have a thought leadership agenda and relentlessly pursue it and get it done. But if you only did the first two, it's a binder on a bookshelf. So the third piece is, how do you deliver it to your colleagues so they can use it? How do you deliver it to your associates so they can use it in their personal life? And then finally, how do you take it to the outside world and influence the agenda in the outside world that you interact with? And that delivery function needs to be very strong. But if you only did the third piece, then you're just talking with no content. If you only did the first piece, you have only content, you're not talking. And so you need both the creation of the content and the delivery of the content. So you need to be able to do both.
And that's one of the reasons when I think about organizational thought leadership, it's about create, curate, which is your strategy component, and then deploy it. Get it into the hands where it will spread, it will reach scale and produce impact.
And there's a
So
lot of technique to that deployment, right?
please.
It can't be a tome. It can't be a eye glazing long white paper. It should be like the podcast that you and I are doing. What are those thin slices that you can get out into people's hands? What are the talking points? What are the graphics? What are the snippets? What are the bullet points that busy executives and busy frontline colleagues can leverage in their prospecting conversations and their client relationship conversations, etc.
Well, and that's one of the challenges of thought leadership, isn't it? Where you're trying to take forward thinking topics, things that people aren't talking about today, and distill it down to an infographic or a slide or a short moment in a podcast, right? And how do you create a sense of urgency so people start thinking about it and that they understand? And there's a very difficult messaging challenge to take something forward thinking and complex, because there's the old Mark Twain quote where he said, I apologize that I wrote you a long letter because I did not have the time to write a short one. In today's sort of short attention span world, we have to make the complex accessible when people aren't thinking about it
I
in a
totally
short
agree.
window.
I'd like to call them snackable bites.
Yep.
And let me give you an example of a snackable bite
Please.
right now.
Okay.
So we talked about people living longer, and here's a snackable bite. A baby born today has a 1 in 3 chance of living to the age 100. And a baby girl born today has a 1 in 2 chance of living.
Wow.
Right? So there's a
Yeah.
snackable bite.
Yeah. Exactly. And then that opens the question of, well, if you have a newborn, what does that mean? And how do you plan for her chance that she's going to live to be 100, which is now a 50-50 chance?
Exactly.
For a new parent thinking about their children's future, that's game changing, where it's like, yeah, they'll be around in 2120.
Exactly.
Wow. So I want to close with one last question. If you were to give a bit of advice, and there are many people now who are joining the world of thought leadership in organizations, and they're taking on a thought leadership role, either as a practitioner or a leader of a thought leadership team. What is a piece of advice that you would give to a new practitioner or leader of a thought leadership team?
Yeah, so I think it's twofold. The first is be very comfortable with ambiguity. So it is not a predefined role like a product manager or a marketing executive, etc. So it is what you make of it. And so be prepared for the person who appoints you in that role not to have a clear definition of what thought leadership is. That's how it was for me. I made, with the help of my senior colleagues, what it is today over a period of time by many trials. So be comfortable with strategic ambiguity. But two, focus on deliverables. Create things, create content, create insights that are usable. So, no need to go conquer the world, but have deliverables along the way. And as you keep delivering them, and as you get comfortable with that ambiguity, new opportunities will present themselves, and then you go capture those. So those would be the twin pieces of advice I would give.
Thank you, Surya. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you joining us today.
Bill, thank you very much.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please join our LinkedIn group, Organizational Thought Leadership. It's a professional community where thought leadership practitioners talk shop about our field. So if you're someone who creates, curates, or deploys thought leadership for your organization, then please join the conversation in the Organizational Thought Leadership LinkedIn